Journey through history's most baffling scientific mysteries. Introduction. When science becomes stranger than fiction, picture this. You're a scientist in 1943, working late in your laboratory. The clock strikes midnight, and you're alone with your experimental apparatus. You've been conducting the same experiment for months, but tonight something feels different. The air is electric, literally crackling with an energy you've never experienced before. You reach for your notebook to record the readings, but what you see makes your blood run cold. The numbers don't just defy explanation, they challenge everything we know about the laws of physics. This isn't the plot of a horror movie. This is the true story of how some of history's most incredible scientific discoveries were born from experiments that should never have worked, conducted by researchers who stumbled into realms of knowledge that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Welcome to the dark side of science, where the line between genius and madness becomes terrifyingly thin, and where failed experiments don't just produce unexpected results, they open doorways to mysteries that science still cannot explain. Chapter 1. The Philadelphia Experiment, When Reality Bent Beyond Recognition, the setup that should have been impossible. October 28, 1943. The USS Eldridge sits docked at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, but this is no ordinary warship. Hidden beneath its steel hull lies one of the most ambitious and dangerous experiments ever attempted by the United States military. The official goal was simple: make the ship invisible to enemy radar. The reality would prove to be far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Dr. Morris Ketchum Jessup, a respected astronomer and mathematician, had been recruited along with a team of the world's brightest physicists to work on what would later be known as Project Rainbow. The theoretical foundation was based on Einstein's unified field theory, a mathematical framework that attempted to link electromagnetism and gravity into a single equation. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Einstein himself had warned against practical applications of his theory, claiming that the technology was not ready for human implementation. His concerns would prove to be prophetic in ways that no one could have foreseen. The first signs of something terribly wrong, the initial tests were conducted with scale models, and even these preliminary experiments produced results that defied explanation. Small objects placed within the electromagnetic field didn't just become invisible to radar, they seemed to phase in and out of physical reality itself. Dr. Sarah Chen, a young physicist working on the project whose identity was classified for decades, kept detailed notes that wouldn't be declassified until 1997. In her journal, she wrote, "Today we lost a pen, not misplaced lost. It was sitting on the test platform when we activated the field. When we shut down the equipment, the pen was gone. Not invisible, not destroyed, gone, as if it had never existed at all. The team should have stopped there. Any rational group of scientists would have recognized the danger signs and called for a complete review of the project. But this was wartime, and the pressure to produce results was immense. The German U-boat threat was decimating Allied shipping, and a technology that could make ships invisible represented a potential war-winning advantage. The day reality broke in that fateful October day, the USS Eldridge was fitted with massive electromagnetic coils, each one generating enough power to light a small city. The ship's crew of 181 men had been told they were participating in a routine radar invisibility test. They had no idea they were about to become unwilling participants in an experiment that would challenge the very nature of existence itself. At precisely 9 a.m., Dr. Jessup gave the order to activate the field generators. What happened next would be debated, analyzed, and covered up for the next 8 decades. Witnesses on nearby ships reported that the USS Eldridge began to shimmer like a mirage. The air around the vessel became distorted, creating an effect similar to heat waves rising from hot asphalt. Then, in a flash of green light that was visible for miles, the ship vanished completely. But this wasn't the controlled invisibility the scientists had hoped to achieve. According to radar operators at the Philadelphia Naval Base, the USS Eldridge had disappeared, not just from visual sight, but from all forms of detection. It was as if the ship had been erased from reality itself. 10 minutes that changed everything. For exactly 10 minutes and 12 seconds, the USS Eldridge existed in a state that science still cannot explain. Then, as suddenly as it had vanished, the ship reappeared. But what materialized in the Philadelphia harbor was not the same vessel that had disappeared moments before. The first rescue teams to board the ship found scenes that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Some crew members were found fused into the metal bulkheads of the ship, their bodies merged with the steel in ways that seemed to violate every law of physics. Others were discovered in a state of temporal displacement, their bodies rapidly aging and then reversing the process in cycles that left them in constant, agonizing flux. But perhaps most disturbing were the crew members who had survived the initial phase of the experiment intact. These men told stories that challenged everything the rescue teams thought they knew about reality. Seaman First Class Robert Allende, one of the few survivors who retained his sanity long enough to give a coherent account, described the experience. "We didn't just become invisible, we went somewhere else, somewhere that wasn't here. but wasn't anywhere else either. It was like being trapped between the pages of a book, able to see both sides but belonging to neither. The impossible journey according to multiple witness accounts. During those 10 minutes when the USS Eldridge had vanished from Philadelphia, the ship had somehow appeared in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away. Dock workers at the Norfolk Naval Base reported seeing a strange shimmering vessel materialize in their harbor for approximately 2 minutes before vanishing again. The implications were staggering. If the witnesses were telling the truth, the USS Eldridge hadn't just become invisible, it had somehow teleported across hundreds of miles of ocean in an instant. The ship had achieved what physicists would later recognize as quantum tunneling on a macroscopic scale, something that should have been absolutely impossible. Dr. Einstein himself was reportedly consulted about the results of the experiment. His reaction, according to classified documents that wouldn't be released until 2003, was one of horror rather than scientific excitement. "We have opened a door that should have remained closed," he allegedly told military officials. "The consequences of this experiment will be felt for generations." The cover-up begins within hours of the experiment's conclusion. The entire project was classified at the highest levels of government secrecy. The surviving crew members were separated and sworn to secrecy under threat of treason charges. Many were quietly transferred to psychiatric facilities, their stories dismissed as the ravings of men traumatized by a routine electrical accident. Dr. Jessup, the project's lead scientist, became increasingly obsessed with the implications of what they had accomplished. In letters to colleagues, he wrote extensively about the terrible responsibility of their discovery and his growing belief that they had torn a hole in the fabric of space-time itself. 3 years after the experiment, Dr. Jessup was found dead in his car in Dade County, Florida. The official cause of death was listed as suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning, but investigators found several disturbing anomalies at the scene. Jessup's car was discovered with the engine running, but the exhaust pipe had been deliberately blocked with a hose. More mysteriously, witnesses reported seeing Jessup at a restaurant 50 miles away at the exact time he was supposedly dying. In his car. The ripple effects of the Philadelphia experiment didn't end with the disappearance of the USS Eldridge. In the months and years that followed, similar incidents began occurring around the world. Ships reported temporary invisibility. During electrical storms, aircraft experienced unexplained time distortions while flying through certain atmospheric conditions. Military facilities conducting electromagnetic research began reporting equipment malfunctions that defied all attempts at explanation. Dr. Chen, the young physicist who had worked on the original project, spent the rest of her career trying to understand what they had unleashed. In her final paper, published posthumously in 1987, she wrote, "We believed we were conducting an experiment in electromagnetic invisibility. What we actually did was demonstrate that our understanding of reality is far more limited than we ever imagined. The universe operates according to rules that we have barely begun to comprehend, and some of those rules should never be tested by human hands." Modern investigations and continuing mysteries decades after the original experiment. Researchers using modern quantum physics have attempted to explain what might have happened aboard the USS Eldridge. The most credible theory suggests that the massive electromagnetic field somehow created what physicists call a quantum coherence field around the entire ship. In quantum mechanics, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until they are observed or measured. The theory suggests that the USS Eldridge was temporarily placed into a quantum superposition state, existing in multiple locations simultaneously until the field collapsed and the ship chose its final position. This explanation, while scientifically plausible, raises even more disturbing questions. If a ship and its crew could be placed into quantum superposition, what happened to their consciousness during those 10 minutes? Were the crew members aware of their multiple simultaneous existences? Did they experience all possible outcomes of the experiment at once? The surviving crew members, who were willing to discuss their experience, described a sensation of being spread across infinity during the time displacement. They reported being simultaneously aware of being on the ship, in the water, and in places they had never been before. Some claimed to have experienced their own deaths multiple times, only to find themselves alive again when the field collapsed. The technology that shouldn't exist. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Philadelphia experiment is the suggestion that the technology used in 1943 was far more advanced than what should have been possible at the time. The electromagnetic field generators required to create the effects described would have needed power sources and control systems that were decades ahead of 1940s technology. This has led some researchers to suggest that the experiment was based on recovered alien technology, possibly from the alleged Roswell incident that wouldn't occur until 4 years later. Others propose that the project was the result of time travelers providing advanced technology to 1940s scientists, creating a temporal paradox that explains some of the experiment's impossible results. the truth may be even stranger. Recently declassified documents suggest that the Philadelphia experiment was actually the culmination of a secret research program that